going to do is use these different demographic indicators and population pyramids as case studies. So similar to what they would do in med school. Med school, what they'll do is they'll identify certain characteristics, certain age, certain ailment, disease, and then med students have to figure out, well, what's wrong with them based on the case that's presented. And so we're going to do the same thing here, but we're just going to apply demography and these different things we've learned to identify what current stage of the demographic transition model different countries are in. And now we present our first case. And so here we have a country in which its growth rate's declining, but it's still, fairly high, especially 95 and 2005 was high. We see fertility rate's coming down, but still is quite high. We look at currently at 5.3 compared to the United States, which is about 2.0, but still quite high. Crude birth rate, 2015, 39 is extremely high. So a very, very high birth rate. So we're starting to get some clues here. We look at life expectancy, 51. 51 is pretty low. We look at infant mortality rate. Whoa, that number is very, very, very big. That's not good at all. So we have a very, very high infant mortality rate, and so that very much speaks to a lower income country probably. Further, the crude death rate is at 14. So we compare once again crude birth rate to crude death rate, 39 versus 14. That explains big time why this population is growing. 39 to 14 is a huge difference, and so the rate of natural increase will be quite high for this particular country. Finally, let's go down the bottom, and we see net migration kind of goes back and forth, but currently it's negative. And so here we have the snapshot of a country that has still a decent growth rate, a very high fertility rate, very high birth rate, a death rate that's coming down, but still very, very, very big gap between birth rate and death rate. But finally, we can see currently the people are leaving the country. This is quintessential stage 2 country. So all those are characteristics of a stage 2 country. And that country would be Afghanistan. And so we can very clearly see Afghanistan as a stage 2 country by looking at the base of the pyramid. Is the base of the pyramid, does it get wider and wider and wider as we go towards the bottom? And for the most part it does. So we look at Afghanistan. It is a good example of a stage 2 country based on its demographic indicators, but also its pyramid shape, especially there at the bottom. So if you're investigating Afghanistan, some of the things you would note, first off, is you do see a bit of a sex ratio imbalance there at the bottom, which indicates, once again, a cultural preference for males in society over females. And so some of the reasons for that, I'm not going to go too much into that, but that's essentially gender equality and the role of women in Afghani society. Further, we look at the bottom, we see a difference. We see something that, if you're going to write about this country, that you have to talk about. And so we can understand, okay, well, we can explain why does the population continue to grow and grow and grow at the bottom. But if we look at that age group, for example, look at the 10 to 14 and the 15 to 19-year-old groups. You notice that it looks like there's a little kind of almost that comes in there at the 10 to 14 age group. So what goes on? What's going on there? And so deductive reasoning, okay, 2015 minus 10 to 14 years. That would be during the Taliban rule, and that's when, obviously, we went to war with Afghanistan. And so that makes sense. That you're not going to have a huge birth rate. You're going to have a huge increase in birth when all of a sudden you have a country that's war-torn, that's in chaos, that's in shambles. And so we can kind of see that. And so subsequently, we can see that 0 to 4 age group, some stability return. And so typically when some stability returns, independence, or in this case, conflict starts to slow down a bit. Not saying that Afghanistan has no more conflict, but we can see how then everything starts to go back into its predetermined, its predestined situation where at the bottom every generation gets bigger and bigger and bigger.